Shadow Soldiers number 5. Shadow Soldier series. Written by Rath W. Asing. Narrated by Stephen Floyd.
About the author. Rath W. Asing is a pseudonym, an anagram created to remove celebrity from the author and place the focus on the central message of these adventures and other books contemplated. The E is silent. So is the warrior. But the vigilance, while silent, is real. The author can be identified as a part of these novellas, a character, either unique or composite, that moves through these military thrillers. As the publishing editor and an advocate of these adventures, I requested more background, but the dark stare ended my inquiry. Anonymity is an asset to those who walk the dark side of our world. It is a double-edged sword, taking away the rights of the individual for full disclosure, but providing shelter for the bearer of the burden of our protection. In my last conversation with the author, he indicated his prayer was that someday dark soldiers would not be necessary. On this and the underlying message of these stories, I place my credence of the author's good character. William Joyce, Project Advocate.
Suspect 7. Chapter 1. Open Case File. Synopsis. An 8-year-old cold case with a twist allows both Sarge and Emily to set aside their sadness for the loss of Megs and solve a mystery Homeland Security gave up on. Seaside Dinner. Unsolved cases, no matter how you try to be objective, create an inner turmoil you cannot set aside, and the Gethel's Bridge bombing attempt sits at the top of my list. I shouted at Derek Brown in response to his snickering. The file, strewn across the table, contained case notes of the bombing and one fugitive at large, Carrington Dalton Parrington. JT sat on the kitchen table, attentive to my case analysis, so I continued. The last-minute heroics of a Port Authority patrolman pulling the blasting caps out of the Semtex and thwarting the tragedy moved the case out of the public awareness and into the classified hands of Homeland Security. I was assigned during the initial investigation to represent New Jersey police and was told to go back to city crime when Homeland ran out of leads and interest. Over the 8-month investigation, we identified 8 individuals as potential perpetrators and interrogated all but one. We never found Carrington Dalton Parrington, making Parrington the top person of interest, and Homeland had a nationwide manhunt established. But when the other leads went dry, they moved on to more immediate threats against the United States. The fading light of Friday sunset left a golden tinge on the pages strewn atop the table. Stretching, I got up to find more wine. Sometimes it bothers me that old cases haunt my downtime. Giving the idea of pouting a well-deserved moment, I huffed and went to find the Chardonnay. Emily, you probably know that file word for word. Why pull it out on such a fine evening? Derek entered from the back porch and went directly to the big pot on the stove. His fish soup reached its perfect simmering temperature. Taking a spoon and testing the soup, he put in just a little more salt. JT remained silent and attentive. We talked about this case a few times, and he knew when to give me my space. He smiled at Derek, but kept out of the discussion. Tables set, and Sarge arrived. Derek waited while I came out of my trance, standing with a bottle of Chardonnay poised above my empty glass. Come on, Emily. Our guest deserves your undivided attention. Looking up at Derek and then at the bottle, I smiled. Sorry, Derek. You know me in cold cases. I'll put it away. Quickly gathering the pages into a folder and placing them back in the box on the kitchen chair, I refocused my mind. I would return the file to the storage closet after dinner. Passing by the delightful pot of fish soup, I voiced the question. What if Parrington was not the perpetrator? What if we were looking at this all wrong? I almost turned back to the file, but JT's arm found its place around my waist and kept me moving towards the screen door and the porch table set for a fantastic fish dinner. Derek laughed and opened the screen door. Now that would really be something. You will have to apologize for all the things you have been calling him over the last 7 years. My smile gave him insight into my thoughts as I tossed an oven mitt in his direction. He knew me better than any other person could. A father figure when I needed one. He caught the mitt and tossed it onto the counter, adding, "JT, bring the bread basket and the hot sauce. Dinner is served." Sarge sat at the table where Megs used to sit to enjoy the harbor vista. He jumped up, hugging me. "It's so good to see you, Emily. The case in Portland kept you away for a long time. How are you?" The conversation ebbed and flowed as the soup served to sate appetites. The empty bowls paid homage to the chef. Of course, Sarge, after complimenting the chef, immediately added a healthy dose of hot sauce. Chance encounters. Being admonished guests don't do dishes, Sarge found a seat at the kitchen table, moving the box of evidence and idly thumbing through the pile of documents. To everyone's surprise, he pulled a picture from the stack and asked a question. "Why do you have a picture of Bandy Albertson in your New Jersey case file? I don't believe he ever left the Montana mountains in his life." "Who?" I turned, almost dropping the dish, seeing the face of Carrington Dalton Parrington staring back at me. "You know that guy?" I was across the room and standing right in front of Sarge. "Sure. He helped me track down a drug dealer in Montana a few years back. A bit of a loner, but a good guy to have when wandering in the woods." He put the picture down and looked at me. "How do you know him?" "He is Carrington Dalton Parrington, the top suspect in the Gethel's Bridge bombing attempt and wanted by Homeland Security. It's an open case from my days in New Jersey. You sure about this guy?" "Well, Emily, I know one way to find out. Tell me about your cold case. Let's see if we can close it together." Sarge, in his element, yelled for Derek to get his bags in from the car. He was staying on the boat and working on my cold case. Armed Vengeance. Chapter 1. Resurrection. Synopsis. While recovering from her wounds, Megs prepares for her new mission, taking down the organization that killed her father and destroyed her life. It starts in the Blue Ridge Mountains, being tended by a retired master sergeant named Carter. WCM mirrors her actions. John and Sarge get Mac from Mexico and go after Meg's killer. Ben gets Red, Blue, and Joe involved in bringing down the Shining Blade. The killer of Meg's father is revealed, and a governmental conspiracy is uncovered to include a former Secretary of Defense. Morning. Carter entered the bunk, expecting to see the patient snuggled under the comforters on the lower bunk bed. The cabin is empty, although the coffee pot still held half of the morning brew, and the plate in the sink indicates his tenant ate well before leaving. The master sergeant opened a few windows and tidied up the hunter's cabin, including changing sheets and doing dishes. He did not hear her approach and had no idea how long she watched him before turning towards the door. "Aren't you the one who orders others for KP duty?" "You're AWOL. Maybe I should install bars on the door." "It's time, Carter. 8 months is enough. I need to get moving." The woman moved into the room and stood in front of the master sergeant. "I would not have made it without your help, but I have a mission, and it is time for me to start." Her face had one last bandage over her right eye, the result of the 5th and final plastic surgery, dramatically changing the woman's appearance. She was no longer the shining white knight of the military justice system. She was now the dark angel, focused on seeking revenge for her father's murder. He put his hands on her shoulder, smiled, and moved her towards the chair. "Sit. I have some paperwork for you." He retrieved a satchel he hung on the wall and dug out a passport. "You know you don't need to hide your plans from me. I have been in a battle or two, and you can rely on my discretion." She sat in the chair watching him but did not speak. "Blue took care of your new identity. Carla Marjorie Holstead is a middle school teacher on sabbatical from Carmel, Indiana. It seems you have a penchant for Native American history and are trekking the wilderness following the Lenape migration to Indiana." Megs took the passport offered. "Oh, this envelope contains bank accounts and other documents you'll need. Blue told me to have 3 sets of aliases made up, and I'll have them ready in 2 days. He watched her reactions carefully. What do you say? Let an old Master Sergeant take a look at your battle plans? Carla, stood and walked into Carter's arms. I trust you like I trust Blue. No more covering up my plans. But first, grab a fishing pole. I'm starving. Dinner and dedication. Only tiny bones and fish tails remained of the fish and root vegetables. Carla, still finding it odd to hear that name used by Carter, placed a cup of coffee next to the man now looking at her workboard. In the center was the man, Percy Beneford, whom she approached in Washington, D.C. He most likely ordered her assassination. This was not speculation, as Blue verified his involvement and confirmed the existence of a group called the Shining Blade. They were somehow involved, and it was up to Carla to find and destroy those who ruined the lives of Megs and her father, Monkey Wrench. You could bring your team at WCM into this and attack. I know them, and they're up to the task. Carla did not respond, accepting his right to question her plans. I will be the Dark Angel, outside the law, acting from the shadows. Sarge will put a team together, and Blue will launch an offensive on Meg's behalf. But I will be the avenging specter that will place fear in the hearts of those who did this. She set her papers aside and grabbed the scotch bottle and glasses. I need to do this, Carter. Some will find their way into the halls of justice, but some will feel my wrath. To the Dark Angel. Carter clinked his glass against hers and swallowed the burning liquid. Decisions. The next 3 days included travel preparations, and Carter left her on her own. Little did she know that she had already been out hunting her prey. Her execution of Jeffrey Billy Daniels and his handler from Shining Blade happened before her final surgery on the right eye. It made the scope unwieldy, but the stalk and takedown went to plan. Seeing John about to take the same shot made her heart skip a beat. The WCM team was active and willing to cross the line. The flowers left at her sniper's nest were a thank you. Tomorrow she would leave for parts unknown. Carter was still fuming about her decision to go dark, and their last conversation had a raw edge of anger to it. Still, the old soldier knew his place, and he arrived with the alias paperwork he promised. He came up to the cabin on a well-worn but fully maintained motorcycle. I had these saddlebags made up for you. If you pull off the right one, the back has a hidden pouch for these alias documents. The left side has a pouch you can access from the inside, with the opening hidden in the stitching at the top. That is not as concealed, but effective for cash and other odds and ends. He tossed the keys and placed the helmet on the bike seat. It was black and had an angel kneeling with its wings dropping, etched in silver on the side. I'm here. He toed the dirt on the pathway. If you need me, I am here. Carla put her bag down and embraced the soldier. Monkey Wrench would get along great with you, Carter. You two would have been a hoot at a party together. Thank you for helping me. There was little else to say, and the JSOC agent turned Dark Angel, shouldered her backpack, and straddled the bike. Nodding, she placed on the helmet, and the patient disappeared. The black helmet seemed to transform the woman, and as she revved the bike, the Master Sergeant shivered in the presence of an avenging specter. Carla reached a roadside picnic area, pulled the bike over, and removed the right saddlebag, placing a dark leather journal in the hidden compartment. It had one page filled in with the heading Percy Beneford. The Dark Angel had begun to mark those destined for her vengeance.
Pawns are expendable. Chapter 1. Scene of the crime. Synopsis. A soldier, relegated insignificant by both peers and his superiors, plots his revenge. WCM is brought into the mystery by an anonymous caller, forced to solve the murders and find the reason for the revenge. The ambulance, being the last official vehicle to arrive, guided Emily down the footpath towards Lake Anna's boat dock. Just 47 miles from Washington, D.C., Lake Anna State Park is a well-used getaway for D.C. movers and shakers.
The call received by Sarge came when both Emily and Alec were celebrating the completion of a case at the Fredericksburg VA Denny's, only 30 miles from the crime scene. The caller, while remaining anonymous, gave enough information to assure Sarge would call Emily and get her involved. The grating female voice indicated a tie to Toms River, Emily's old precinct. The Virginia State Troopers, aided by the park rangers, pulled the body from the lake and exposed his chest to the new investigators assigned by someone high up in Washington. Emily looked down at the 2 grouped bullet holes in the chest that matched the one in the body's forehead. The shooter scrawled ABR below the heart shots in indelible marker. "This is our case. I'll need each of you to give a statement, and I will have Alec follow up with any paperwork your department needs." Emily nudged the state trooper back from the edge of the dock and took his place, giving her control of the body and the crime scene. "Give me one valid reason I should give up jurisdiction, lady." He barged through the growing crowd and stood inches from Emily, hands on hips. "I expect you are Sergeant Wallace." Emily reached into her shoulder satchel and withdrew a green case file labeled ABR. "This is what gives me authority. This is the 4th body found with ABR scrawled on the victim's chest. One in Maryland, one in New Jersey, and one in Missouri match this one. This is a Secret Service FBI case." She watched as the state trooper fumed, but controlled his anger. "Look, we are open to accepting your help, but this thing is bigger than one body in a lake. If you would like, assign one of your special investigators under my command. I would appreciate it." "Yeah, your case. I understand. Deputy Baldridge will be assigned to you for the Virginia side of the investigation. I would appreciate being kept up to date." The state trooper tipped his hat and turned, signaling the deputy to follow him. As they moved towards the parking area, Emily grabbed Alex's arm. "Do me a favor and keep the deputy under your wing. Make him feel like part of the case and tell me if I need to intercede." "No problem, Emily. It'll be nice to have a trooper on the team. Can I make him my gopher?" "Alec, behave yourself. And yes, you get to play with the new guy." Turning back to the body, Emily began what her years of detecting told her would make a difference: pictures and evidence bags. The case grows. Hours later, Emily started a new victim document, adding it to the green folder. Clarence Alchemy, age 48, white male, Chief Operating Officer for Dalton Emergency Resources, arms supplier for the U.S. Army. He was on vacation from his D.C. office and not missed. They recovered his camping gear from the other side of the lake, and Emily assigned Alec and his gopher to inspect the campsite. The water's edge contained both blood and drag marks, making it the scene of the murder. The shell casings were found on the ground less than 3 feet from where Clarence dropped to the ground dead. It was close up and planned. Someone is tracking down and executing people across the country. So far, no pattern except all 4 victims worked for companies that supplied the U.S. Armed Services with weapons and equipment. Alex spoke his thoughts out loud to no one in particular. Sighing, Emily rose, retrieved a bagel from the bag Alec brought in, and stretched. "We'll need to look back through their lives and see where they intersect. You think your state trooper is up for some research work?" Alec pushed himself up from the couch where he slouched, sipping his coffee. "Brian and I got it. I have some friends back in D.C. who have the know-how to get the information we need." Emily nodded and went back to the files on the table. "Our trooper is a good egg. How's it going with your new sergeant friend?" "He understands. Besides, I sent Red to tap him on the shoulder and give him the spooky conversation. He'll stay in line." The afternoon wore on, and just before dinner, Emily placed the last document in the file. "Time for some food, and you need to get on the road." Alex placed his laptop in his carry bag. "Steak, please." "There's just one big question that's bothering me." Alec looked up and waited for Emily to complete the thought. "Who was it that made the call to get us involved?" The Meeting of 14. Chapter 1. Omens. Synopsis.
When the enemy is standing at the center of power, the mercenary must choose where their might is best directed. Angel gets to lead a team that must forego politics so democracy can survive. December 14th. You stupid fool. You sent an email to an outsider and mentioned the rally. The trench-coated figure stared at the prostrate man on the warehouse floor. I was told to report. You guys said she was my boss. I did nothing wrong. Albert, get Sydney working on erasing this jackass. Barker, I need you to take out this garbage. The crying man looked up as the figure above him calmly pointed the gun at his forehead. That was the last thing he saw as the trigger was pulled. The rest of the night was dissolving a body and constant calls between the team and Sydney, who erased the error from the World Wide Web. They knew it couldn't be done, but Sydney was a pro, and he would build in dead ends and false leads, keeping prying eyes from One World Consortium. Barker was the silent, deadly type. He rolled the corpse onto an old tarp and dragged him over to the large vat once used to hold sand for the foundry. Dumping the body in with the tarp, Barker poured in 5-gallon cans of potassium hydroxide. Once it covered the mess in the vat, he built a fire under it. It would not reach the optimum temperature, but would dissolve all but a few bones in less than 8 hours. I need someone to tend this mess while I clear out his apartment. Barker pushed past Albert and nodded to the other man, still holding the gun. You need me for anything else tonight, boss? The man holstered the gun and tossed Barker a wallet. Make sure you check for any friends or relatives and meet me at noon tomorrow at headquarters. Barker nodded and turned towards the door. Oh, Barker. He stopped his movement but did not turn. Bring me some of that Mexican food you like. Barker let the door slam shut as he left. He hated Mexican food, and his boss knew it. It took 6 weeks, but the newspapers finally noted Godfrey Belford Meadows' absence and the uncanny coincidence of the death of his mother in Pennsylvania, along with the fatal car accident of his uncle in Montana within 2 weeks of his disappearance. The FBI took an additional 6 weeks to pull at the evidence threads. They finally put out an arrest warrant for the fleeing Godfrey Belford Meadows. He allegedly killed his uncle and mother over a lost inheritance of $5,649. Sidney closed the file with all his notes and tossed it into the flaming incinerator. Knowing company policies, he left no evidence of his work to be found and used against him. January 3rd. Officer Martin Dunnings almost dropped his Snickers bar as he opened the office door of the senator from Massachusetts. He stood there with a calendar, a bust of Lincoln, and the 5-wood the senator held when writing speeches. Taking a step back, he put his hand to his gun and shouted, "Stand where you are!" The man in the ski mask froze and obeyed. "Is there anyone else with you?" He shook his head, indicating he was alone. "Put the stuff down and face the wall. Place both hands on the wall and spread your legs." Patting him down and cuffing him, Officer Dunnings called for backup. They would now need to search the entire Capitol. It was 11:30 p.m., and they had an intruder. 6 hours later, Clarence Gordon Brumfield was processed and safely tucked away in the jail used by the Capitol Police, which held prisoners until their trial. Clarence faced some serious charges, but his first words were lawyer, so the only thing they could do was babysit the thief until the court system did its thing. January 14th. I don't care what you believe. I did everything I could to get that clown reelected. You are the one who insisted on bringing in those white supremacist thugs, and it backfired on you. Penelope Babette smashed the unsmoked cigarette into the dessert dish, still half filled with peach cobbler. She worked for American Rights Movement, ARM, for the last 3 years and enjoyed her work. Once a teenage soldier disillusioned with her country's politics, she was now discharged for behavior unbecoming an officer. Talking to the shadows, she found work through mercenary magazines until ARM offered her a permanent position. As far as she could tell, she was third from the top of the organization, with only the unknown ARM leader and her boss above her. Her boss, Carmela Reynolds, picked up the plate with the cobbler and cigarette and tossed it in the trash. "Hey, you can wash that." "You listen, Benny, and you listen well." The boss put her face inches from the nose of the agent. "When I give an order, you follow it.
No questions. No changes to the plan. Carmela stood up and hesitated, looking at the sulking agent. That clown didn't matter. The election doesn't matter. Who the hell are you to think at all? This is planned way above us, and now they want an accounting. The boss picked up her dessert plate and tossed it in the garbage pail. Her voice steadied, and she patted Penelope on the shoulder. Don't worry about the dishes. We have to run. The shock of the sitting agent was apparent. Now. Both moved as one for the back door of the shanty in the Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, Virginia. Their car was on the dirt road 30 feet from the maintenance shanty used by the park rangers. Carmela started to toss the keys back to Penelope, catching a glimpse of her awkward movements. She was running, but her head turned around sharply towards the cabin. As Penelope's feet flew out from under her, the sound of the rifle made Carmela look up at the trees. She never focused on the hide as the second bullet entered her forehead. Martin Collins calmly swung down from his perch in the denuded silver maple tree 600 yards south of the shanty. He received his orders on January 14th and accomplished his mission within 6 hours. Tracked down 2 ARM agents and end their careers. Martin never questioned orders, and he never missed. He had heard of ARM and their pretty little agents running around Washington, D.C. He knew of many more little bands of revolutionists that his boss used when quick action was required, keeping their organization out of the fray. Terrorists from the Middle East provided valuable lessons in organizational tactics. A major key was to keep themselves isolated from public scrutiny. It did shock him that his orders were to leave the bodies where they fell. He could have removed any trace of the 2 women, but his boss's orders were detailed and followed to the letter. Walking over to the 2 bodies, he removed their wallets and replaced them with 2 provided by the techie guy. Almost identical to their real identities, it would lead law enforcement to a white supremacist group operating out of Oregon that was upset about Jews in position of power. If Martin questioned his actions and his boss decided to give him the information, he would realize that his organization was using the mistakes made by these agents to advance their cause. Nothing wasted, no opportunity ignored. The One World Consortium would reach its goal of American dominance. April 18th. The most challenging job for an organization is to keep all its soldiers in line, especially when the goal is covert, treating soldiers like indentured servants, unknowledgeable of the ultimate goal. Chipper Belvin shivered in the dark night, watching 3 men enter his townhouse. His beat-up Chevy Nova broke down 6 blocks from his home, saving him from being home when the 3 arrived. The 3 left, jumping into the waiting black van and speeding away. Just as he was about to move from his hiding place, a sharp light flashed and went out across the street in the shadows of the parking garage. Someone, left behind to catch him returning, lit a cigarette. 18 months of glorious promises and hard work allowed the young accountant to gain access into the first inner circle of New World ventures. The last month opened his eyes to the real reason for the organization. They were not a watch group for social justice. They were an accounting firm built to uncover assets worth acquiring. The financial records he spent hours analyzing were stolen documents, allowing strong-armed henchmen to make acquisitions via hostile takeover. Yesterday, a secretary noticed his disgust for the operations. Moments later, she was on the phone, and he realized she had reported him to the higher-ups. 6 weeks before, a friend's outburst about improper notifications had her sent home for 2 days. 1 day later, the news of her auto accident reached the firm's accounting floor. Chipper's questioning of corporate conduct was far worse than Harriet's outburst. His gut decided it was time to move. He stood, asking a colleague to accompany him to the records room. Once the 2 were out of the sight of the accounting bullpen, he instructed Jerry to gather the March and April expense reports while he got additional personnel records from the company. He stated he found a money leak, the golden ticket in their efforts. Finding inadequate record keeping would get a gold star from the higher-ups. You and me, Jerry, are going to get a big bonus for this one. I'll be back soon. Get started highlighting everything to do with Westro hauling services. Outside on the streets of northwest Washington, D.C., the accountant passed by the company they were auditing and took the bus to his car in long-term parking. The bus ride to Forest Glen gave the shaken accountant time to think. He made up his mind to gather his stuff and head back to Kansas. No job was worth this kind of terror. The parking lot outside of the D.C. city limits reduced his cost of parking, but took him hours to reach via public transportation. The 30-minute drive to his apartment let the sun descend below the horizon, and darkness filled the streets and alleyways. Another 14 minutes walking from where his car gave out brought him to his street just as the black van pulled up and 3 men raced toward his building. After witnessing the cigarette, he turned in the alley and slowly felt his way to the next street. At the end of the alley, he carefully surveyed the street. Just before crossing, a woman walked up to him, smiled, and spoke. "They're not watching this street. Follow me and I will keep you safe." "How?" "Not here. Follow and keep quiet." She crossed the street and entered another alley. He followed. Halfway down, she opened a sliding door once used by a coal company and shoved him into the darkness of the coal bin. About to run, Chipper felt her hand on his shoulder as she whispered, "Consider me the neighborhood watch. I saw everything go down at your apartment and I know the thugs looking for you." "Okay." "Stand still a moment. I'm going to open the door to the safe house." She reached behind him and pulled a lever. A sharp light appeared in front of him as the wall parted. A man with a beard stood in the brightly lit room and spoke before he could adjust to the light. "Hey guys, look what Stephanie brought us." The man took Chipper's hand and shook it while others patted his back and sides. He was being frisked, and he stood stone still, not knowing how to react. "And what brings this fine fellow to our little party, Stephanie?" "This is Chipper Bellman, who moved here about 2 years ago and works for one of our targets, New World Ventures. It seems Chipper ran into a bit of a problem, and they just tossed his apartment looking for him." She guided Chipper to a seat at the table, placing a mug of ale in front of him, turning to the one who frisked him. "Gavin, I need you to tell Barbara about our new guest and have some guys take care of his car. It broke down on East Lander Street north of Wheeland Avenue." "We ordered pizza for dinner. Is that okay with you, Chipper?" Gavin grabbed the wad of bills from the table and headed up the stairs. April 19th, 0130. Barbara opened the roll-top desk that looked out of place in her ice cream shop's kitchen. The false backboard slid up, giving access to the laptop tucked behind it. Opening the machine, she typed her request. WCM headquarters. 2021041119. Immediate action required. Situation in NWDC indicates we have critical activity and need assistance. Believe that we have activity tied to the election debacle and overt activities that concern me. Please advise at the earliest. Barbara. Picking up the phone, she selected G and started talking once he picked up. "Gavin, make Chipper comfortable. We'll keep him in town until we have a place to send him. I put a call into Sarge. I think we just uncovered a lead into the nonsense going on in the halls of Congress. This could be big. Get everyone prepared and ready." Current affairs. Conservative view. Barbara voted for the president who would not give up his throne. She believed fervently that the liberal agenda was destroying the real value of America. Politics and religion were taboo subjects in her day-to-day activities, but critical choices had to be made now as her world burned. Day after day, the rhetoric of her right-wing news outlets displayed the insanity of the former president. For the 100th time, the liberal media played the conversation between U.S. President and a state attorney general. At first, the political theater could be brushed aside, but the continuing stream of evidence poured fuel onto the fire, and the reality of constitutional transgression emerged. One conservative newscaster always had Barbara's thoughts and feelings covered. Tonight, she declared the newly elected president a criminal for stealing the election by changing the votes on mail-in ballots. The TV received a large lump of dough as her frustration reached her limit. What was happening to her country? Command Level 4. Chapter 1. The Incident. Synopsis. 47 separate accidents across the United States and the Virgin Islands, tied together by one death of a WCM friend, making them all suspect.
Elapsed time, 3 hours, beginning at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 100 individuals died in 46 separate accidents across the United States and 1 in the Virgin Islands. An additional 253 were killed as collateral damage. The case. The capture of the perpetrator of a mass shooting in Allentown, Pennsylvania, case CL4-16, ended badly when the man broke free from the police officer and tossed himself into traffic, ending any chance of gathering information. Carlton Boise lay on the Leahy County Coroner's office slab, his broken body barely discernible after being dragged under the garbage truck for half a block. Joe's visit went without any record of access, and the assistant made sure no one would be aware of his interest in the case. Melissa Baines lived in a quiet Allentown neighborhood because Red, Blue, and Joe saved her and her daughter from a serial killer. She hugged Joe and handed him a file containing the police reports and other notes she had gathered over the last 2 days. She knew this was a highly classified investigation, but Joe had special clearance with the Leahy County Coroner's Office Assistant Director. Joe left with copies of the pertinent files and headed to the Allenwood Motel 5 minutes away, just off the old Leahy Valley Thruway. Meeting of spooks. Here's the thing. Blue walked to the dinette table and grabbed a donut as he approached the coffee pot. There is absolutely no way the Justice Initiative could have pulled off the Allentown assassination, much less all 47 actions. This is being controlled by some group higher up. Are you sure we want to know? Red spoke up from the kitchenette. Boise could have been acting alone. We have no proof he's still working with the Justice Initiative. Are we certain this is our case? Both Blue and Joe looked up. Red didn't turn from the stove as he carefully flipped sunny-side-down eggs. 20 of the victims on this list are good guys, as far as we can tell. Joe pushed the file he was building across the kitchen table. Command Level 4. Number 1, City, Washington, D.C. Victim, Senator Paley Bratt. Target, 1. Casualties, 2. Perp, Mary Wellington, killed by the senator's bodyguard. Number 2. City, New York, New York. Victim, Jeremy Martin Randolph. Target, 3. Casualties, 34. Notes, apartment fire. The door for the Randolphs found to be wedged closed, trapping the family of 3. 31 other tenants died in the fire. Number 3. City, Colton, South Dakota. Victim, Gail Peterson, a.k.a. Emily Lacombe, prime witness in the Dawson Capitol scandal. Target, 5. Casualties, 5. Notes, 4 agnates and 1 witness killed in a shootout. Number 6. City, U.S. Virgin Islands. Victim, Portnoy Charles, advisor to the United Arab Emirates royal family. Target, 3. Casualties, 18. Notes, Conair Flight 238, catastrophic engine failure after takeoff. All perished. Number 12, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Victims, Betty Richards. Target, 1. Casualty, 1. Notes, strangled in her car outside the Philadelphia courthouse where she worked. Number 16, City, Allentown, Pennsylvania. Victim, Pastor Brantley Adams. Target, 1. Casualties, 37. Perp, Carlton Boise, committed suicide during the arrest. The list sat on the table, showing 6 of the 18 names Emily Burke Hansen identified with notes the 3 made so far. Joe knew more research was necessary, but he could tie 6 to the Justice Initiative so far. Betty Richards was one of us. Blue's voice held a bit of an edge. Red placed the eggs in front of Joe and took the seat across from Blue. We all think we know where this will lead, and we know that it will not end well if we're right. I need to make sure you are ready for the consequences. Blue stood and pushed his plate of eggs away. Betty was about to start the case against the Justice Initiative. Emily Burke Hansen is the one who put the list together, showing the tie between 18 cases in Betty's court case. H added the others, bringing the list of 47 incidents that could be related. No matter who is behind this, I will find out who murdered Betty. Joe stood and raised his coffee mug. I'm with Blue. Red stood and turned back towards the stove. Okay, we're all in. Now we need some resources that can't be touched. If we're going to do this, we need the Dark Angel. Blue, you need to contact her. Blue nodded and went out into the hall, speed dialing Dark Angel on his phone. Joe handed Red the file. Do me a favor. Get this preliminary listing out to Sergeant H as soon as possible. Do you want Blue to give a copy to the Dark One? Red shook his head no and started to clear the table, muttering, We're in it now.